Good morning. Thank you for your patience. It's been a while, right? Yeah, I know, I understand. It's been a very long time. And today, I'm not exactly sure where this is going to go, but we're going to talk a little bit about what's happening and see if you have any interest in my perspective on it. Let me start with Russell. Since so many of you are Survivor fans that have come to my YouTube channel, many of you know who Russell Hantz is. He's someone who's played the game several times, who's never won, but who has ranted and raved and basically made a career out of convincing people that he should have won. But he wasn't playing Survivor. He was playing his own game in his own head, different from what's required to win Survivor. Follow me? Who does that sound like? So last night I tweeted that the narcissistic dolt, the orange moron, was plagiarizing Russell. And people started to comment suggesting that they thought Russell was a narcissistic dolt too, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I want to be clear. I wasn't calling Russell names. I wasn't suggesting that he's a narcissistic dolt. I don't know him as well as I know the orange moron. I know Trump, and I know he is a narcissistic dolt. So, no, I'm not holding back. Just let me be clear. That's who I think he is. And he's pulled this strategy right from Russell's handbook. This is long before the actual election. Trump went through the motions of setting the tone to prepare his followers for exactly what's happening now. Slowing down the post office, claiming there was going to be fraud. Mail-in is a problem. Mail-in votes have been in most states for many, 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 many years, and there have been no problems. In fact, there have never, ever been any systemic fraud problems associated with voting in the U.S. It's one of the things we can be most proud of, is how clean our elections are. But those of us paying attention to what Trump has been saying for so long knew he was planning to obfuscate and dissemble. If you don't know those words, look them up. I didn't know them when I heard them a few years ago, and I love them. And Trump is the absolute king of obfuscation and dissembling. He takes what he knows to be real, throws it away, and spews all kind of distractions and made-up nonsense to cause people to follow a point he wants them to believe that very often has almost nothing to do with reality. And from my perspective, reality matters. Reality, what's true, matters, or it ought to. And one of the things that's going on in our country is this dearth of critical thought. I'm not sure I can explain why, but I don't think most of us have been taught the value of thinking critically. Very often I think religious folk tend to think that critical thinking is somehow averse to their beliefs, somehow a dig on who they are. And that's not how I intend it. I'll give you another story about yesterday. So, John Rich, an incredible musician, just a fantastic guy with whom I was on Celebrity Apprentice. And John is also a guy of moral character. He's kind, he's thoughtful, he's caring. I spent enough time with him to get a real feel for how good a human being is. He's a good person. I reached out to him for help a long time ago, and he cared enough to consider whether he could help me. His lawyers, etc., everybody advised him not to get involved, and so he couldn't. But he's just a good, kind, caring guy that would step up for someone he knows or doesn't, I think, and do the right thing. And on Twitter, he'd said something to the idea of, stealing votes. Well, we'll have to wait and see about these votes being stolen. And so I reached out and I said something about recognizing what a good person he was. I spent enough time with him to know that, and I was saddened that he'd bought into this orange moron's ploy and was believing the red herrings that Trump is throwing out there. It's frustrating for me and sad. And he wrote back and thanked me for the way in which I disagreed with him kindly. I disagreed in kindness. And I thought to myself, I wonder what that says about how many people have reached out to him and whether or not they have been just polite, just kind, just speaking to other human beings as if their perspective has value, even if you vehemently disagree with it. And of course, I vehemently disagree with the idea that any votes have been stolen. There is no evidence whatsoever still today. Today's Monday, after the election, and there is zero evidence that any widespread fraud of any kind related to the election has happened. In fact, all of the suits that Donald has brought so far have been dismissed by the courts. Republican and Democratic jurisdictions alike have spoken out and talked about there being no evidence. In fact, many, Republican administrators included, have talked about the smoothness, perhaps in history, that this election, how this election unfolded. Incredibly smoothly, incredibly cleanly, and the counting of legal votes continues. Not dead people, not votes that came in after the deadline of Election Day, typically 8 p.m. or so. Those aren't votes that are being counted. There isn't any evidence whatsoever anywhere of fraud. Trump's got a hotline out there for you to call in and tell him what you know. He's looking, he's searching, he's trying, he's thrown everything he can at the wall, and he's trying to make something stick. Why? Because he's a desperate, utter narcissist who could not care less about the damage and destruction he does by making these things up. All he cares about is staying in, holding on to power. It's obvious. If you step back and you take a look at this child, read his niece's book, Mary Trump's book. I mean, just to get a sense for who the people who know him, like me, who they are and how they feel about him and what they've observed. It matters. The guy is an awful, awful, awful human being, and he has not done what he's claimed he's done for those of you who follow him. He's made you believe that he's done things that are helpful. He's made you believe that he's kept his word, but he hasn't. He hasn't done things that are helpful, and he hasn't kept his word, and Mexico hasn't paid for the wall, and he's just really, truly desperate to keep himself from facing the legal challenges he faces as soon as he walks out of office, from losing the power that he's enjoyed sitting in the office of the Presidency of the United States. And I, for one, am convinced that when this all unfolds very, very soon here, Joe Biden won this presidency handily, cleanly, legally, and he will take office in January. What his policies are, who he is, was he the best candidate ever? Who knows? But anyone is better than Donald Trump. And for that, we celebrate. I'm so happy that we have a chance to get back on track. Now, let me talk about back on track. Back on track doesn't mean sliding back into the same morass of standstill politics that have been going on for decades. What it means for me is focusing on Georgia, for example, the next 2 Senate seats there. If those can be won by the Democrats, the possibilities for progress are endless. Otherwise, if they're lost, Mitch McConnell will be in the way of whatever it is that the Democrats want to achieve. I say, give them a shot. Give the Senate seats in Georgia to the Democrats, and let's see how the Democrats can uplift, revigorate, invigorate, reestablish relationships with the rest of the world and our allies, rejoin the climate control agreement, go back to being someone who prioritizes the world and its people and who isn't focused on personal wealth and gain, greed. I know there are many of you. I know there are just many, many, many of you who don't see Trump that way, but I just don't see evidence that he isn't. And I know him. I've been around him. I've watched him. I understand what's happening. I'm open to any kind of evidence that you want to present about why you think he was good for us, but I have not seen it. He's taken the Republican Party in a horrendous direction. He's been manipulative sufficiently to sway lifelong Democrats from what they believed as part of their core values all their lives. Forget the personal horrendousness of who he is as a human being. From a moral standpoint, just the way he's treated women and marriage and who he feels he's entitled to be with respect to how he treats them and marries them and divorces them and pays them off to keep them quiet. Ugh, it's all gross, and I know some of you separate that from what he does in office. But the truth is, what he does in office is just as self-serving. He doesn't care one lick about any of you at all. He'll do or say whatever is expedient from his perspective anytime. It doesn't matter if it has anything to do with reality. And again, I keep going back to reality matters, or it should to you. So I encourage you, please think critically. That does not mean take my word for it. That doesn't mean believe what I say. That means just think about why you perceive things that you're perceiving, why you think the way you do, why it is that you've come to conclude whatever it is you've concluded. Remember, ignorance is not a bad thing. I did a video, I think, about the difference between ignorance and stupidity. And to encapsulate it really quickly here, ignorance is a state of being. We, as human beings, are ignorant. We don't have all the information, all the facts to know what is absolutely true all the time. So there's nothing wrong with being ignorant. What is wrong, what becomes wrong, is when we confidently espouse beliefs without support, and then we spout them and shout them and share them and try to dissuade others in harsh, dramatic, unyielding, closed-minded ways. Remaining open-minded involves saying things like, I really, truly believe there is a God. I really, truly believe Trump is a good person. I really, truly believe Trump wanted to do what was in the country's best interest. Those things are worded in ways that help me believe you're a thinking person. You understand what it means to be aware that you might not have all the facts. And in fact, most often, none of us do. We're all missing a piece of the puzzle here and there. And all we can do, I think, is try to keep open-minded sufficiently to allow new data to come in. It's not an easy thing to do. But the harder we work at thinking critically, the better off we all are as human beings. I'm convinced of it. Thank you, sincerely, for listening to my videos. Please subscribe. It's free. And please comment. I really do read your comments, and I do try to respond. If you have any ideas about what more you'd like to see or ways in which you might be interested in partnering, feel free to reach out. Thanks again very much.